All right, today I'm doing an interview with Coach Z, former basketball coach. And before I start, how you doing today, Coach Z?
I am doing
I
fantastic.
get a chance to shake your hand. First off, I want to thank you for having this interview with me, giving me some of your time. All right, jumping into this interview, what made you choose being a basketball coach?
It's a good question. My father was a high school track coach and football coach. And I guess being around him and being around the sports and seeing the relationships he had with his players um, kind of piqued my interest. And and that's pretty much why I got into it, just because of the relationships with players and saw how people's lives could be impacted.
Okay. So moving right along, I'm gonna ask you, what's the best part of coaching?
Best part about coaching. Hmm. I would be dishonest if I didn't say the wins. Winning was obviously, um, but it's there's a difference between winning and being successful. And obviously, winning is you score more points than your opponent. Um, Successful is really how much do you make a difference. Um, so the other wins for me off the court really, you get a former player who calls you and says, "Hey, I'm getting married, or I got a new job, or I'm having a baby," and you get invited to weddings and that type of thing. So it's again kind of going back to the relationship building. Um, to this day, I mean, to hear from players that I coached 30 years ago is really makes it all worthwhile.
Okay. So I gotta ask you, what's worse? What's the better feeling? Well, I'm trying to see how I'm gonna state this question. Losing a close game or winning a blowout?
What's worse? Oh, losing always is worse. I mean, as Pat Riley said so many years ago, there's winning and then there's misery. And that's pretty much how much it is. But we always had a rule that we had the 12 o'clock rule. So if we won a game, we would celebrate till midnight and then prepare for the next game. If we lost the game, we would sulk and be miserable till midnight, and then we would start preparation for the next one.
All right. So that brings me to my next question. How long do you usually prep for games?
How long?
Yeah.
Just depends on time of the year. Depends on how many days. Generally speaking, when you get into conference play, you're playing. My last 7 years as a coach at UMKC, all our conference games were Thursday, Saturday. So you'd start preparation. You give guys off on Sunday, which was usually a travel day back from the previous game, and then on Monday you start preparing. So you're talking about 3 days.
3 days. Okay. So you're in the game coaching, and you get an angry fan or an angry parent from the bleachers. How do you deal with angry parents?
I recruit orphans. um, I never really heard any angry parents from the stands during a game. Obviously heard some angry parents because their son didn't play, uh, after the game. But I guess I'll put it to you this way. My first year as a Division I head coach, I was 27. I was the head coach at St. Francis College in Brooklyn. And I went to see a New York Knicks game. A friend of mine
Did they win?
was coaching. Actually, they did win. They were playing Golden State. This is how old I am. So afterwards, I'm in the locker room area because in the hallway, a friend of mine was an assistant with the Knicks. And I see this woman screaming at Don Nelson, who's the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. And I could kind of hear what she was saying. She's talking about shots and points and all this. Well, my friend walks out of the Knicks locker room, and I said, hey, Jeff, who's the woman chewing on Don Nelson's ear? And she says, well, that's Derek Chivas' mother. And I thought, all right, he's an NBA coach, and yet he's dealing with an angry parent who's unhappy with her son's playing time. So if he can listen, I'll listen. But most of the time, with parents, I had the ground rule. I'm not going to talk to you about your son's playing time. I'll talk to him about academics. I'll talk to him about social life, but I'm not going to talk to you about basketball because you're not there every single day.
Yeah.
And I've had some interesting conversations with parents through the years. One mother in particular who came in at the beginning of the summer and said, "Coach, you got to break up my son and his girlfriend.
What?
She's distracting him."
Oh my God.
And he's a 20-year-old kid in college. I mean, I said, ma'am, I won't tell you the name, but ma'am, there's just, I don't think I can do that.
Man.
If you can't do it, I'm sure I can't. Ironically enough, that guy, the player, actually married the girl. I think they have 3 kids, and he's a fireman back in Kansas City. So, it seems like a happy marriage. So I'm glad I didn't take the mother's advice.
All right. So since we're talking about family, how is it juggling family and coaching, like as far as schoolwork and all that?
It wasn't easy. I had 3 kids. My oldest actually went to 7 different schools in 12 years.
Dang.
He was always the new kid on the block.
I know that was kind of tough for him too.
So
always having to make new friends.
That's kind of part of the reason I got out of coaching was my younger 2 were in junior high and freshman in high school, so wanted to keep them in Kansas City. But it's time consuming. But I had 2 older boys, so the fact that they could come to practice and hang out and go to some of the games was a good feeling. My oldest got into athletics, but not coaching. My youngest is a college soccer coach. So,
Oh man.
and my daughter is back in Kansas City as a school teacher and actually an assistant track coach. So, I guess it rubs off a little bit.
Man, coaching running the blood, huh?
A little bit.
All right. My final question would be, what advice would you give someone like me choosing this profession?
It's interesting. There are a lot of coaches. When I was a young coach starting out, there were a lot of coaches who would say, "Oh, don't do it. Don't get into it." And I'm like, "You've been doing this for 30 years. Why would you say that?" I would never say that to somebody because I loved every second of it. As far as advice, I mean, the biggest thing is you just got to, whatever your sport, you've got to work on your craft. You got to learn as much about that sport. In my case, it was basketball. You got to learn as much about basketball as you can. And don't be afraid to ask people for advice, for help, or to, be part of their program. Because the truth of it is, and this goes for pretty much any profession or any job, it's, what you know is important, but who you know is equally as important, because it's who you know that's going to help you get in the door.
Yeah.
And then what you know is going to keep you inside. So, make as many friends as you can along the way. I mean, the biggest factor or biggest thing that I did that helped me in my coaching career is when I was in college, I would work 10 weeks of summer basketball camp across the country. I grew up in Ohio, but I would work camps in the East Coast, anywhere from Virginia to Syracuse to New York City to wherever. And those contacts, the people that you meet, the coaches that you meet along the way have proven very valuable in my journey.
Oh, man. Well, thank you, Coach Z.
All right.
Appreciate you for your time, man.
All right, man.